After the GAG, the Governmental Advisory Group meeting in Amsterdam, where a director of the National Development Bank of Brazil participated, the bank is seriously considering to use the principles of GRI as one of the conditioning practice to lend money. Mm-hmm. Then this was the impact of this meeting right now, and in the next 2 years, maybe the GRI will be a reference to strategic investment in the country.
And the Brazilian government, unlike some governments, has money, which is interesting. I'd like to see if we've got a couple of questions. We've got about 10 minutes to go. We've got a few microphones around the room. I've got Jeff's hand is up over here, and don't know. I'd like to take a couple at a time if I can. Anyone else want to raise a question? Jeff, why don't you start, and then we'll see if we. And then there's another one here. There's in the middle of the room. Sarah. Yeah.
Hi, Jeffrey Hollander. I'm the chairman of Seventh Generation and a proud GRI reporter for the past 5 years. My question is, I experience sort of a disconnect in that you have provided, all of you, great leadership about the urgency of climate change. And somehow when I leave the room, I live in a world that is dominated by business voice that's saying, no, legislative action is not what we need to do. The chamber does seem to dominate the conversation. And I feel like we, the businesses that believe in the urgency and how critical this is, are not, sorry?
Keep going, keep going. Just trying to get the next one in.
Okay.
Keep going.
Are not winning the battle to communicate the business case for taking action on climate change. And the time is now. The Congress, the Senate, I mean, they need the cover of businesses to say that it's not going to destroy the economy. And I feel like, hey, you know, what can all of us do to bring this conversation into the public policy arena? Mm-hmm. Because without us, I'm scared about the outcome.
We've got a question over here, Sarah, right in the middle of the room. You can think about the answer to Jeffrey's great question, and go for it, Sarah.
I'll double up on Jeffrey's question, since we're part of the same coalition with BICEP. My question actually is something I've been thinking about since I was at a conference yesterday in Vancouver, and Paul Hawken was talking, and he reminded me of something that I think is really it's an underlying issue for us as an industrial society, which is over the last 200 years, we've built our success on using things that we had in abundance, which was natural resources, and driving as much productivity as we could out of the things that we had very little of, which was people. We've now flipped that equation. We're about to get 9 billion people on this planet in the next 40 years, and we're running into huge constraints around natural resources. So what that looks like is long-term unemployment for a good many people, and I'd really love to hear what the panel thinks about some of the solutions around that.
Two great questions. Either of you want to start with one of them?
Okay, about Jeff's question, I think that something is not working well between what's happening in the real world and what's happening in the governments, and even in the traditional mindset of business as usual. The climate change is putting so many new challenges, and they are so complex that we are not being able to interpret and look to it on its systemic impact. I really think, I was in a meeting in New York during the UN Assembly, and I heard a very, very sensitive issue about why China is going faster on its regulations on climate change, and the United States was going slowly on this process. And it looks like a paradox. Why a democracy that have all the people participating in this multiply richness of opinions and movements and so on was not turning out to put pressure on the government, and in a dictatorship, the government was acting faster. Then what I'm trying to say here is that the only way we can really take the huge and very beneficial benefits of the democracy on the Western world is systemic understanding of what climate change means, and not pretending that this will impact only the business or the way we consume or the way, no, it will impact the concept we have of citizenship. It will impact the concept of governmental responsibilities. It will impact the concept of interdependency and how we should converge in some things. It will impact the concept of sovereignty of countries. And I think that we are living in a moment where we are hesitating because the things that are happening are so broad that we don't know exactly from where we should start. And that's where I think that the business community can really play a very, very important role, because the business community works in an interdependence way. It talks to hundreds and hundreds of other companies in its value chain. It has an impact in dialogue with the consumer, and it has the power of communication. Then for all these reasons, I think that business can still put huge pressure in this agenda and expect a good outcome from it.
Ernst?
Let me start with Sarah's question. I think life will be very different. Should we assume that we'll all be employed? What is fundamental is that we find ways to deal with our planet's resources in a very, very different way. Whether we go to the cradle-to-cradle concept, whether it's any variation on that, not sure. Your company, your own company, is making great strides in that and is showing leadership by developing technologies and finding ways to deal with our resources in a very different way. When we become smarter and use our resources very differently, that will have social and economic consequences. Can 9 billion people be full-time employed? Will the economy stay the same? I don't have the answer. What I do know for sure is that the fundamentals of the economy will be very differently. If we could fast forward and see the economy as it will be in about 20 years' time, I think that many of us would be highly surprised and would not recognize many of the patterns of the shape of the economy that we would see then. And that is, we'll have to discover this, and that's why we need to communicate with each other and really make this a key area of attention. It's of fundamental strategic importance. To come to Jeffrey's point, how can you act? Well, the most important thing is, I think already implied in the way you asked the question, Jeffrey, there seems to be still a generalized perception that business will be against any government role, against any form of regulation. Yet some companies, and again some of you are representing this, have said no.